the phrasing here about a faithful Creator. The apostle stands in the middle of your confusion and declares, He's the same God He was back in Genesis 1.
Oh, yeah.
He's still turning darkness into light.
Yeah.
He's still transforming what is without form and void into majestic creative majesty. He's still a God of process.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Don't give up on Him because on day 2 of your process you cannot see the finished outcome. He is still speaking His let there be word over your life. He is still creating. He is still transforming. He is still perfecting. And you can trust Him because He is faithful. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
Again, this is the bedrock of our faith. This is the bedrock upon which everything we believe and everything that we become is built upon.
Yep.
That's right.
2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slack concerning His promise, as some count slackness. New Living Translation. The Lord isn't really being slow with His promise, as some people think. No. He's being patient for your sake.
Yep.
He's not doing what you want when He wants Him to because you're not ready yet.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I know you think you are, and 4-year-olds think they can drive.
Amen.
New Century. The Lord is not slow in doing what He promised, the way some people understand slowness. He doesn't want anybody to be lost. He wants everybody to change. Look at your neighbor and say, He wants everybody to change.
He wants everybody to change.
Look back and say, that means me.
That means
You thought you'd say you did. The Message paraphrase says it like this: God is not late with His promise as some measure lateness. He is restraining Himself on because of you. He's holding back the end because He does not want anybody to be lost. He's given everybody a space and a time to change. The Lord is not slack. That word means delayed, late, or hesitant. Meaning, the Lord is not late in doing what He promised.
Yep.
The Lord is not hesitant to do what He promised. The Lord is not delayed in doing what He said He would do. This same chapter begins with telling us that we need to continually be mindful of what God has promised, because in the last days, the closer we get to seeing His promises fulfilled, there will be a crescendo in the voices around us who will tell us that this kind of blind faith and confidence in God is foolish and illogical. That if you haven't seen it by now, you might as well wake up and smell the coffee and accept it that it's not going to happen. But that every promise He has made, church, including His soon return, it will happen exactly as He said it will.
Amen.
And then comes the explanation of 2 Peter 3:9, that God is not late. God is not hesitant. God is not reluctant to do what He promised. He has not been delayed, but even when it seems like it's a long time coming, we can trust that He is right now faithfully doing what is in our best interest, because our God is faithful.
Yeah.
Encourage us and to embolden us to keep on trusting in His faithfulness even when we cannot see and do not understand what He's doing. The Scripture is here to give us something to hold on to and to declare into our storm that even in our waiting, He is still working, faithfully doing for us everything that He said He would. Why? Because our God is faithful. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
And again, this is the bedrock of everything we believe and everything that we will become.
Yep.
Matthew 24:45. Jesus taught about a faithful and wise servant whom their master had given authority over everything he owned. Verse 46, somebody say everything.
everything.
Verse 46, Jesus said that this servant being blessed, this servant receiving what has been promised, is the key is in their faithfulness to be found still doing what they've been given the authority to do. Verse 47, Jesus said, I guarantee it. They will receive what has been promised.
Right.
But then in verse 48, Jesus flips the coin and says, but if that servant begins to think that his master is not faithful, if that servant begins to think that the master is delayed, is late, is hesitant to do what he promised, that kind of thinking is evil. Yeah. For it will cause nothing but problems and confusion. Right. Yeah. If that evil servant begins to think my master is delayed, this delayed here is the same word as used over in Hebrews 10:35 when it says, so do not throw away your confidence because it has great reward. For you need endurance in order to do God's will so that you will receive what has been promised. For just a little longer. Somebody say just a little longer. And just a little, oh my, just a little while. And just a little longer. And he who's coming will arrive and he is not late. He will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith. And if he shrinks back, I take no pleasure in him. For we are not among those who shrink back and thus perish. But we are among those who have faith and persevere and preserve our souls.
Amen.
In order to receive what has been promised, we must have the tenacity, the confidence that He is not late. He is not hesitant. He has not been delayed, but He is faithfully doing right now exactly what He promised. And again, this kind of faith is the bedrock upon everything we believe and will become is built upon. Why? Our God is faithful. Amen. Back to Matthew 24:48. But if that evil servant I began to entertain thoughts and justify attitudes and actions that I would have no time for if I was entirely convinced that in His faithfulness, He is right now doing what He promised. When I began to go back on consecration, when I began picking up things I have already laid down. When I began to justify things for which I once felt convicted. When I began playing around with things from which He has already delivered me.
Uh-oh.
Come on now.
When I began to become entangled again in those things from which He has set me free. It is a symptom that I do not believe that God is faithful to do what He has promised. The stories could be told of tragedies that come through playing around with things from which God has set us free. In the words of Christ, when we do so, the latter end is always worse than it was before we were initially delivered. Hear me, child of God. Every principle in the Word, every conviction in the Spirit, but it is dangerous for me to ever back up, let go of the consecrations and dedications I have made. Yep. Because when I do so, it's a symptom I don't think He's faithful. Third symptom, I do not believe God is faithful, shows up in who I choose to spend my time.
Oh, yeah.
The old adage, birds of a feather, comes to mind. Matthew 24:48, Jesus said that servants who question the master's faithfulness will gravitate toward people who think like they're thinking and will do the same things they are justifying. When I'm looking for a reason to do what I know I should not be involved in, it's just human nature to look for somebody who thinks like I think and who will agree with me. Now, there is power in agreement. But whether or not that's power is there. Hebrews 6:9. I'm about to get to the message. Even though we speak like this, dear friends, we are confident of better things in your case. Things that accompany salvation. And God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you've shown Him as you have helped His people and continue to help them. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end. Don't stop doing it in order that you can make your hope secure. We do not want you to become lazy. But imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. When God made His promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, God took an oath in His own name, saying, I will certainly bless you, and I will multiply your descendants beyond number. And then Abraham waited patiently, and he received what God had promised. You know why? Because God is faithful. Now, when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without any question, that oath is binding. God also bound Himself with an oath so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that He would never change His mind. So God has given both His promise and His oath. And these two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie. Yep. Therefore, we who have fled to Him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. This hope is like a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. God is faithful. Amen. This is the foundation of everything that we believe. And it is the foundation of everything we will become. Hebrews 6:9. I'm about to get to the message. Even though we speak like this, dear friends, we are confident of better things in your case. Things that accompany salvation. And God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you've shown Him as you have helped His people and continue to help them. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end. Don't stop doing it in order that you can make your hope secure. We do not want you to become lazy. But imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. When God made His promise to Abraham, since there was no one greater for him to swear by, God took an oath in His own name, saying, I will certainly bless you, and I will multiply your descendants beyond number. And then Abraham waited patiently, and he received what God had promised. You know why? Because God is faithful. Now, when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without any question, that oath is binding. God also bound Himself with an oath so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that He would never change His mind. So God has given both His promise and His oath. And these two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie. Yep. Therefore, we who have fled to Him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. This hope is like a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. God is faithful. Amen. This is the foundation of everything that we believe. And it is the foundation of everything we will become. Our God